preparing for something. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Sarah threw herself into planning the party with an energy that surprised everyone around her, including herself. She found herself taking extra care with her appearance on the days she knew she might run into James, though she told herself it was just about feeling confident and put together. David seemed to notice her renewed vitality. He complimented her cooking more often, brought her flowers on Wednesday for no reason, and even suggested they take a weekend trip to the coast, something they hadn't done in over a year. "You seem different lately," he said one evening as they worked together in the garden, preparing the outdoor space for the party. "Happier, more, I don't know, more like yourself." Sarah paused in her pruning of the rosebushes. Was she more like herself? Or was she becoming someone entirely different? She wasn't sure she knew the difference anymore. "Maybe I just needed something to look forward to," she said. Which was true, even if it wasn't the complete truth. The complete truth was more complicated. The complete truth was that she found herself thinking about James Hartwell at odd moments throughout the day. When she was choosing wine for the party, she wondered what he preferred. When she selected the playlist, she found herself imagining what kind of music might make his eyes light up the way they had when he laughed in that conference room. She told herself it was harmless, just a little flutter of attraction that added some excitement to her otherwise routine life. She was married. He was her husband's boss. And nothing would ever happen. She could enjoy the feeling of being noticed, of feeling feminine and attractive, without it meaning anything more than that. But deep down she knew she was lying to herself. The night before the party, as she was doing a final walkthrough of the house, making sure everything was perfect, David found her in their bedroom staring at herself in the full-length mirror. "You look beautiful," he said softly, coming up behind her and placing his hands on her shoulders. She was wearing the new navy dress, and she did look beautiful. The color brought out her eyes. The cut flattered her figure, and her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. But as she looked at their reflection together, she felt a stab of guilt so sharp it took her breath away. "David," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. "What is it, sweetheart?" She turned in his arms, studying his familiar face, the laugh lines around his eyes, the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident, the expression of complete trust and love he wore whenever he looked at her. "I love you," she said, and meant it. She did love him. That had never changed. "I love you too," he replied, kissing her forehead. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect. You've worked so hard on this party, and everyone's going to see what an amazing woman I married." As he held her, Sarah closed her eyes and tried to push away the voice in her head that whispered that tomorrow might change everything. The evening begins. The party started at 7, and by 7:15, their home was filled with laughter, conversation, and the soft jazz music Sarah had selected. She moved through the rooms like a graceful hostess, ensuring everyone had drinks, introducing colleagues to friends, and accepting compliments on her home and her cooking. She had outdone herself, and she knew it. The house looked like something from a magazine, candles flickering on every surface, flowers arranged perfectly throughout the rooms, and the scent of her famous rosemary focaccia wafting from the kitchen. James arrived fashionably late at 7:30, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Sarah spent on groceries in a month. "Sarah," he said, taking her hand in both of his when she greeted him at the door. "This is absolutely stunning." David wasn't exaggerating. He was wearing a navy suit that made his blue eyes even more striking, and his cologne was subtle but intoxicating. Sarah felt that same flutter of awareness she had experienced in the conference room, only stronger now. "Thank you," she managed. "I'm so glad you could make it." David's in the living room with some of the team. But James didn't immediately move toward the living room. Instead, he stepped further into the foyer, looking around with genuine appreciation. "You have exquisite taste," he said. "This is exactly the kind of home I would imagine you creating." There was something in the way he said you that made it clear. He wasn't talking about her and David together, but about her specifically. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Can I get you something to drink?" she offered, needing to move to have something to do with her hands. "Whatever you recommend," he said. "I trust your judgment completely." As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself hyper-aware of James's presence in her home. She could track his location by the sound of his laughter, could sense when he was looking in her direction, even when she was across the room talking to someone else. He was the perfect guest, charming with the other wives, engaging with David's colleagues, and gracious when people approached him with work questions, even though this was supposed to be a social evening. That Sarah noticed that his eyes found her frequently, and whenever they did, she felt that same electric awareness. Around 9 o'clock, Sarah was in the kitchen refilling appetizer platters when James appeared in the doorway. "Can I help with anything?" he offered. "Oh, you don't need to," she began, but he was already moving toward her, rolling up his sleeves. "I insist. You've been taking care of everyone all evening. Let someone take care of you for a minute." They worked together in comfortable silence, James refilling wine glasses while Sarah arranged fresh canapes on serving plates. The kitchen felt smaller with him in it, more intimate, and Sarah was acutely aware of every time he reached around her, or their hands brushed as they worked. "You're a natural at this," she said, watching him expertly navigate the wine selection. "I've thrown my share of parties," he replied, "though none as elegant as this." "It's just about paying attention to details," Sarah said, deflecting the compliment as always. James paused in what he was doing and looked at her directly. "No, it's more than that. You have an intuitive understanding of what makes people feel welcome, comfortable, special. That's a rare talent." The sincerity in his voice made Sarah's throat tight with an emotion she couldn't name. When was the last time someone had seen her so clearly, appreciated something about her that went deeper than just being David's wife, or the woman who makes great focaccia? "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot." For a moment they stood there looking at each other, the sounds of the party fading into background noise. Sarah felt as if she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at something that was both terrifying and irresistibly tempting. Then David appeared in the kitchen doorway, breaking the spell. "There you two are," he said cheerfully, oblivious to the tension that had been building. "James, you're missing the story about the Henderson Project disaster. Sarah, honey, Mrs. Patterson, is asking about your recipe for those little salmon things." "Of course," Sarah said quickly, gathering herself. "I'll be right there." As she moved past James to leave the kitchen, he said quietly, "Sarah." She turned back, and for just a moment, his professional composure slipped, revealing something raw and honest in his expression. "Thank you for including me in this," he said. "It's been a long time since I've been in a real home with real warmth. I'd forgotten how much I missed it." The vulnerability in his admission caught her off guard. This successful, confident man suddenly looked almost lonely, and Sarah felt an overwhelming urge to comfort him, to offer him whatever warmth he was seeking. "You're always welcome here," she heard herself saying, and knew that she meant it in ways that went far beyond simple hospitality. Sarah Mitchell stood at her kitchen window, watching the morning sun filter through the curtains, as she clutched her coffee cup with trembling hands. 3 weeks had passed since the party, yet the memory still burned in her chest like a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. Every time David kissed her goodbye before heading to work, She wondered if this would be the day everything would unravel. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been so excited about hosting that party, so proud to finally have their colleagues and friends over to their beautiful home. Now she wished she could erase that entire evening from existence. But some moments once lived can never be undone. Pause, shift to reflective storytelling. Chapter 1. The perfect evening that wasn't. 2 months earlier, David had burst through their front door with news that would change everything, though neither of them knew it at the time. "Sarah, honey, you'll never believe what happened today," he called out, his voice echoing with excitement as he kicked off his shoes in their foyer. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. She had been experimenting with a new recipe, something she always did when she felt restless. At 32, she had mastered the art of keeping busy, filling her days with cooking, gardening, and volunteer work at the local library. But lately, even these activities couldn't quiet the growing sense that something was missing from her life. "Tell me," she said, offering him a warm smile despite the strange emptiness that had been following her around like a shadow. David's eyes sparkled with an enthusiasm she hadn't seen in months. "I got the promotion, the senior management position. I've been working toward for 3 years. Mr. Hartwell called me into his office this afternoon, and Sarah, we did it. We finally did it." She should have felt pure joy in that moment. Instead, what came was relief mixed with something she couldn't quite name. David had been working late nights and weekends for so long, coming home exhausted and distant. Maybe this promotion would bring back the man she had married 5 years ago, the one he used to notice when she wore a new dress or tried a different perfume. "David, that's incredible," she said, stepping into his arms. "I'm so proud of you." As he held her, she breathed in his familiar cologne, trying to recapture the butterflies she used to feel when he touched her. They were still there, just fainter now, like echoes of what they used to be. "We should celebrate," she suggested, pulling back to look at him. "Maybe host a party. Invite everyone from your office, some of our friends." David's face lit up even brighter. "That's perfect. Mr. Hartwell has always been curious about our home. You know how he is about architecture, and it would be great for the team to see us in a more casual setting." Sarah nodded, already mentally planning the menu, the decorations, the perfect playlist that would create the right atmosphere. She lived for moments like these when she could pour her energy into creating something beautiful for the people she cared about. "When were you thinking?" she asked. "How about 3 weeks from Saturday? That gives us time to plan properly. And it's after the Henderson project wraps up." 3 weeks. Sarah felt a flutter of excitement, the first genuine excitement she had felt in months. This could be exactly what they needed, what their marriage needed. A chance to reconnect, to remember why they had chosen each other in the first place. She began planning immediately, throwing herself into the preparations with an intensity that surprised even her. She researched caterers, spent hours at the flower market selecting the perfect arrangements, and even bought a new dress, a flowing navy blue piece that made her feel elegant and confident. David noticed her renewed energy. "You seem happy," he commented one evening as she hummed while arranging tulips in their living room. "I am," she realized, and meant it. "It feels good to have something to look forward to." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and for a moment, everything felt like it used to. "I love you, Mrs. Mitchell," he murmured against her hair. "I love you too," she whispered back, leaning into his warmth and hoping that somehow this party would be the boss. Sarah first met James Hartwell on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks before the party. She had stopped by David's office to surprise him with lunch, something she rarely did but felt compelled to try as part of her effort to reconnect with her husband. The receptionist directed her toward the conference room where David was finishing up a meeting. Through the glass walls, she could see several people around a large table, but her attention was immediately drawn to the man standing at the head of the room. Even from a distance, there was something commanding about his presence, the way he moved his hands as he spoke, the way the others in the room leaned forward when he talked. James Hartwell was not conventionally handsome, but there was an intensity about him that made it impossible to look away. He was tall and lean with salt and pepper hair, and sharp blue eyes that seemed to notice everything. When he laughed at something one of his colleagues said, the sound was rich and genuine, filling the room with warmth. Sarah found herself standing there longer than she should have, studying this man who had such influence over her husband's career, and consequently their life. When the meeting ended, David spotted her through the glass and waved her in. "Sarah, perfect timing," David said, his voice carrying that particular tone of nervous excitement he got around his boss. "Mr. Hartwell, I'd like you to meet my wife, Sarah. Sarah, this is James Hartwell." When James turned his attention to her, Sarah felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. His handshake was firm, his smile warm but somehow penetrating, as if he could see right through her polite exterior to something deeper. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying a slight hint of an accent she couldn't place. "David talks about you constantly. It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman behind the man." There was nothing inappropriate about his words, nothing she could point to as being out of line, but something in the way he looked at her made her pulse quicken. She felt herself blushing like a teenager. "Please call me Sarah," she managed, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "David's told me so much about you. Congratulations on the expansion into the European market. David says it was your vision that made it possible." James's eyes crinkled with genuine pleasure at her words. "Your husband is being modest. He's the one who made it happen. I just pointed in the direction." As they talked, Sarah became increasingly aware of the way James focused on her completely when she spoke, as if her words were the most important thing in the world. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her that way, really looked at her, not just glanced in her direction while thinking about something else. "David mentioned you're hosting a celebration party," James said. "I'm looking forward to seeing your home." David's described it as quite stunning. "Oh, it's nothing special," Sarah said automatically, the way she always deflected compliments. "I doubt that," James replied, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "I suspect everything you touch becomes special." Later, driving home, Sarah couldn't shake the memory of that look, those words. She told herself she was being ridiculous, reading things into innocent comments that weren't there. James Hartwell was her husband's boss, a successful businessman who was simply being polite to an employee's wife. But that night, as she lay next to David, listening to his steady breathing, she found herself replaying every moment of their brief meeting, every word, every glance. And for the first time in months, she felt truly awake. The moment everything changed. By 11 o'clock, the party had found its rhythm. The initial mingling had settled into smaller conversation groups, and Sarah felt she could finally relax a little. She had changed from her heels into flats and poured herself a well-deserved glass of the expensive wine James had brought. She stepped out onto their back patio, needing a moment of quiet air and space to process the evening. The garden looked magical in the soft light from the paper lanterns she had strung between the trees, and the sound of laughter drifted out from the house behind her. She was admiring the way the moonlight caught the water in their small fountain when she heard footsteps on the stone path. "Hiding from your own party." James's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned, not entirely surprised to see him there. Part of her had been hoping he would find her. Just taking a moment, she said. Sometimes you need to step back to appreciate what you've created. James moved to stand beside her. Not quite close enough to touch, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. It's beautiful out here, he said. Peaceful. I can see why you'd want to escape to it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both looking out at the garden. Sarah was acutely aware of him beside her. His height, his presence, the way. He seemed to study everything with the same intensity he had focused on her earlier. Can I ask you something? James said eventually, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Are you happy, Sarah? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. It was such a simple question, but the way he asked it made it clear he wasn't looking for a simple answer. What do you mean? She asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. James turned to face her fully, his blue eyes searching her face in the dim light. I mean, are you happy? Really happy? Not just content, not just making the best of things, but genuinely fulfilled. Sarah felt her heart start to race. This was dangerous territory, the kind of conversation that could change everything. I have a good life, she said carefully. David is a good man. We have a beautiful home, financial security, friends. That's not what I asked, James said gently. Sarah looked down at her hands wrapped around her wine glass. The truthful answer was too complicated, too risky to voice. I think happiness is more complex than people make it out to be, she said finally. It's not just one thing. It's made up of moments, choices, small satisfactions. And what about the big satisfactions? James asked. What about passion? What about feeling truly seen and understood? What about the kind of connection that makes you feel alive? The way he said it made Sarah look up at him sharply. There was something in his voice, in his expression that suggested he wasn't speaking. Hypothetically. James, she said, warning and question combined in his name. I know I shouldn't say this, he said, stepping slightly closer. I know it's inappropriate and complicated and could ruin everything, but Sarah, from the moment I met you, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Part of her had hoped he would say this, and part of her had dreaded it. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. I know exactly what I'm saying, he replied, his voice steady despite the intensity in his eyes. I'm saying that I see you. The real you. Not just the perfect hostess or the supportive wife. I see the woman who arranges flowers like she's composing poetry, who chooses music that tells a story, who looks at the world like she's searching for something she hasn't found yet. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. He did see her more clearly than anyone had in years. I'm married, she said, the words feeling hollow even as she spoke them. I know, James said. And David is a good man and I respect him. But Sarah, life is short, and moments like this, moments when you meet someone who makes you remember who you really are, those don't come along very often. What are you asking me? Sarah whispered. James reached up and gently touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. I'm not asking you anything, he said softly. I'm just telling you that you have choices. You have more choices than you think you do. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to lean into his touch, to imagine what it would feel like to choose something different, something just for herself. The possibility hung between them like a bridge. She could either cross or burn. Then the sound of David's laughter from inside the house cut through the moment like a knife. Sarah stepped back, breaking the contact, reality crashing over her like cold water. I can't, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't do this. James nodded slowly, his hand falling to his side. I know, he said. I just needed you to know that someone sees you, that someone thinks you're extraordinary. James, Mrs. Mitchell. David's voice called from the patio door. Are you out here? The Hendersons are getting ready to leave. Coming, Sarah called back, her voice only slightly shaky. James stepped back further into the shadows of the garden. Go, he said quietly. Be the perfect hostess. But what I said stands. You have choices. As Sarah walked back toward the house, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her, she knew that everything had changed. The safe, predictable life she had built was no longer safe. The questions she had been avoiding were no longer avoidable. And the man who had awakened something in her that she thought was dormant forever was her husband's boss, making any choice she might want to make impossible. Or was it? 3 weeks later, Sarah stood at her kitchen window, watching the morning sun filter through the curtains as she clutched her coffee cup with trembling hands. 3 weeks had passed since the party, since that moment in the garden when James Hartwell had looked at her and seen straight through to her soul. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, of analyzing every word of their conversation, of wondering what might have happened if David hadn't called for her when he did. 3 weeks of James being nothing but professionally polite when their paths crossed, of pretending that night had never happened, while his words echoed in her mind. You have choices. David had been promoted again, a direct result of the successful party and the connections made that evening. He was happier than she had seen him in years, whistling as he got ready for work, bringing her flowers, talking about their future together. And with each gesture of his love and trust, the weight of her secret grew heavier. The coffee cup trembled in her hands as she heard David's footsteps on the stairs. In a few minutes, he would kiss her goodbye and head off to work, where he would sit in meetings with James, where he would look up to the man who had touched his wife's face and told her she was extraordinary. Morning, beautiful, David said, appearing in the kitchen already dressed in his suit, his hair still slightly damp from the shower. Morning, Sarah managed, accepting his kiss on her cheek while her heart hammered against her ribs. I might be late tonight, David said, pouring himself coffee. James wants to go over the Peterson account, and you know how thorough he is. Sarah's stomach clenched at the casual mention of James's name. That's fine, she said. I have book club anyway. David paused, studying her face. Are you feeling okay? You look a little pale. Just tired, Sarah said quickly. I didn't sleep well. David frowned, moving closer to press his hand against her forehead. Maybe you should see Dr. Martinez. You've seemed off lately. Off? If only he knew how off everything had become. I'm fine. Really, just need more sleep. David's phone buzzed and he glanced at it. That's James. He wants to move our meeting up. An hour. He looked back at Sarah, concern still evident in his eyes. Are you sure you're okay? I'm sure, Sarah lied, forcing a smile. Go. Don't keep him waiting. After David left, Sarah sank into a chair at their kitchen table, finally allowing the facade to drop. Her hands shook as she set down her coffee cup, and she buried her face in her palms. She couldn't continue like this. The weight of the secret, of the attraction she couldn't deny, of the questions James had awakened about her life and choices. It was eating away at her from the inside. What were her options? Tell David about that night, and destroy his trust, his career, their marriage, have an affair with his boss and live with the guilt and deception, or try to forget it ever happened, and go back to the safe, predictable life she had been living before. None of those choices felt possible. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and her heart stopped when she saw the sender's name. James Hartwell. The message was simple. We need to talk. Sarah stared at the screen, her pulse racing. Part of her wanted to delete the message, block his number, pretend she had never seen it. But a larger part of her, the part that had felt truly alive for the first time in years during their conversation in the garden, knew that she was going to respond. Her fingers trembled as she typed back. When? The response came immediately. Today, 2 p.m. Riverside Park by the old oak tree. Sarah's breath caught. He remembered. She had mentioned once, months ago at a company picnic, that the old oak tree by the river was her favorite spot in the city. The place she went when she needed to think. He had been listening. He had been paying attention to details about her that even her own husband didn't remember. I'll be there, she typed before she could change her mind. As she hit send, Sarah knew that she was crossing a line from which there might be no return. But James had been right about one thing. She did have choices. For the first time in years, she was about to make one that was entirely her own. The question was, what would she choose? As she sat in her perfect kitchen, in her perfect house, with her perfect life, Sarah Mitchell finally admitted to herself that sometimes perfect wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to risk everything to find out who you really were. And sometimes the person who showed you that truth was the last person in the world it should be. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward 2 p.m., and with each passing second, Sarah felt herself moving toward a moment that would define not just her future, but who she truly was beneath all the roles she had played for so long. She had 6 hours to decide what she was going to say when she met James by that old oak tree. 6 hours to choose between the life she had built and the life she might dare to want. 6 hours to decide if she was brave enough to find out what happened. Next, at the end, this story explores themes of marriage, attraction, moral complexity, and the difficult choices we face when confronted with unexpected feelings. Sarah's journey reflects the universal struggle between security and authenticity, between the roles we play and the people we truly are. Whatever choice she makes at that oak tree will define not just her future, but her understanding of herself.